So recapping the whole hose management. If you recall, I first started as, this is our residential home. It's a two-story. We're going to make entrance, but we had to deal with the charged hose line. But before I started that, I talked about a loop, creating a loop. So this is really important. Approximately 10 feet for me was chest height, and moving this loop, I talked about moving it like a steering wheel, knuckles to the sky. It's really easy to move. It's a great way to use or move charge 2.5 line as well. So just something to think about. We also talked about the hose. Make sure that the running hose that's moving is always on top. So you can see right here, this is not good. It's underneath, and it's going to prove to be difficult. So if you're a firefighter and you see this type of stuff, you're ultimately just going to flip it over and make sure that that running hose is on top so it moves much easier. Then we also discussed about placement, personnel placement on the hose. Having a nozzle person, our officer or captain, and the backup firefighter behind that. We talked about moving the charged hose line. We had some pinch points. So immediately, if you ran into a pinch point, you have to deal with it in order to make sure that the nozzle person moves with ease. That's the key. So a pinch point itself, I am the pinch point if I'm moving the hose this way. I need to step on the outside of that hose, bend with my quads, and move the hose like so. Again, the key is keep moving the personnel with ease. If you could get as far away from that pinch point, that's the best. So if I can prop my cylinder up against a wall and move it that way, it works really well. We also talked about the backup firefighter, the captain, and the nozzle person. If you recall, I used the analogy, the nozzle person deals with 4 or 5 feet of hose. They just move with ease. They came to the door, they dropped the nozzle, and then they helped the officer move the hose. The officer quickly dealt with any pinch points, moves it along. They may deal with 20, 30 feet of that hose, but the worker bee, or the person that's going to be doing all the legwork, is our backup firefighter, and they were back there making sure that they clear the bed. We have 200 feet, so they're essentially going to be dealing with 150 feet, approximately, of hose. And so when they were in that back corner, if you recall, we asked them to make a loop, never come empty-handed, and to bring it up front. Why do we bring it up front? Well, first of all, we need to identify as basically, with our coupling, this is key to get it to the door. This is a benchmark. Getting it to the door gets me 50 feet. Why 50 feet? Well, in a small residential home, 50 feet will get us pretty much anywhere in a smaller residential home. But that backup firefighter that has come up here, not empty-handed, they brought up 10 feet a loop, they dropped it. When they dropped it, basically you're staging hose up front here. Because when the captain does a 360, you may get into maybe a mansion, a larger residential home, where you may need this excess of hose to get further or deeper into the house. We do not want the extra hose left back by the transverse line or the bed. So the fire crew is happy with managing their hose to the front of this residential home. They have, again, the benchmark of the coupling within 6 feet of the door, so we know we got 50 feet. So now it's about placement on the hose. We want our nozzle person and our officer and then the backup firefighter. And this is what we're standardizing. So once we're in that ready position, we've done all our long bleed, we've done our buddy checks, we're ready to make entry. The backup firefighter is going to come to the door. And this is where we talk about flow path. Really, really important. The door is going to control flow path. So if we open this door up, we are essentially, because our fire was on the 2nd floor, we are feeding that fire with the air and oxygen to grow. And we have to be cognizant of this. And the way to do that is to control the door. So we control flow path and the door, and this is an outward swinging door. In this case, I just hook the outside of my foot, wrap it around, and then pin it with my shin so the door stays stable and solid. Once the officer makes a decision of going in, nozzle person, officer follows in behind. myself as a backup firefighter, my goal and main goal is to pin it to control flow path, and I'm going to move that hose. And my whole goal is to make sure that my officer and my nozzle person move with ease. So I'm just going to move it. So if you recall at this point, we've now had the nozzle person and captain enter. We've come to a pinch point, and what we've said is, once that nozzle person has come to this point and goes around, now it's the captain that has to deal with this pinch point. Because we said the first in truck and what we are standardizing, and everybody is clear and solid, that it is their goal to get to the seat of the fire as quickly as possible. So that means the nozzle person's got to get to the fire room. So the captain came here, they have to deal with this pinch point. They get furthest away from this pinch point and they're moving the hose, which essentially is moving the nozzle person to the fire room. Now, the captain has to make decisions at the fire room. So, that being said, we used the analogy bump. The word bump is moving personnel on the hose. So I would do as simple as an officer, yell down to my backup firefighter, bump. That is telling that person that they want to get off this pinch point and move forward to the nozzle person. So when the backup firefighter hears that, just as we said on the exterior, they're going to come in not empty-handed, and they're going to come in with some extra hose. We use 10 feet. So as an officer, when I call bump, that means the personnel's got to move on the line. So I'm going to move forward towards the nozzle person on the bump. Bump! So as being a backup firefighter, when I heard that terminology of bump from my officer, now I have to make a decision. I'm going to have to get in, and I'm hoping that a second in crew, as discussed, when I open this door, maybe it's an engineer, somebody that's around on this front entrance who could do my door control. Then I'm going to create a loop, and I'm going to come inside. Now again, if it's an area with a lot of smoke, I could be on my knees, moving like so. But I said that we could see our feet, so we had the exercise where we move the hose, and you'll see how easy I can move it up the hose, up the set of stairs. Now, once I've gotten to this point, we talked about staging hose. If I have 10 feet at the fire room, I'm good. And we also talked about the nozzle person saying, I'm good up here. Essentially saying, I have the right amount of hose. So I showed how easy it is to move that 1 3/4 charge line with a loop. Once I get to this pinch point where the officer was, now I have to deal and make sure that that hose is going to move freely for both my captain / officer and my nozzle person. I've also taken that stored hose and I've stored it on the side wall here or of a railing just in case they need it. If they need it, they can pull that loop out, gives them 10 extra feet. This way, I'm secure in the way that I don't need to go running back down to the door. And again, you don't have to bring a loop in with you. We showed you that, but we want you to bring 10 feet of extra hose. Don't come empty-handed, just in case your nozzle person and officer needs it. So again, we gave you a few different ways to thinking about how to store or stage hose. One way of dealing with the set of stairs and having or entering in on the hinge side, which I'll go over in a minute. The key on this was just to step on front of the nozzle in front, and whether we have a railing or a wall, and we only have about 75 psi off this hydrant, but if we have more pressure, it's even easier. But even with 75, you'll see how quite easy it is to run that hose right up the length of the wall, and then I can literally just drop it. Once it's dropped, I can grab my nozzle, and I can go up the stairs with ease, having this excess of hose. Now, if I get to this landing, this will enable me to get to the second landing with ease with this hose. But for our demonstration, we were using gravity-fed hose, and we're going to talk about the hinge side of the door. So with my benchmark, I've staged and stored 10 feet of hose on the stairwell, and it's going to work to my advantage because now it's going to be gravity-fed. But I want to make entrance on the hinge side, and if you recall, the reason being is if I open the room up, I actually see the room. And with this gravity-fed hose on the hinge side, I can move with ease into the fire room when my officer directs me to. But if I am to get on the non-hinge side, as we talked about, and I go to make entry this way, I've automatically created a pinch point, something that's going to make it difficult for me to move my hose. So if you can consider always moving on the hinge side and as well on the non-hinge side, when I open this door up, I see the door and a wall. The fire clearly is not going to be there. The fire is going to be in and around in the main part of the room. So that's why I would want to make entry on the hinge side. We also gave you another tool in the belt to kind of think of. If this was a front door entrance and we entered in and we had to go down a basement, we could also, like we did in the opposite where we drove the hose up a stairwell, well, we can do the opposite where we stand on just behind the nozzle on the hose, and we're going to take our hose and we're going to lay it down the stairwell. Once we do that, we know that we have the hose ready for us. So then I pick the nozzle up, and as I enter down in this danger spot, this is the chimney, this is the shaft with all the hot gases. I'm going to be sounding, going down low, but I have the nozzle with me. Once I get to the bottom of the stairwell, I have all this excess of hose to move with ease. Also, if I'm to fall through a set of stairs, I'm going to fall with the nozzle. So I have my water for my lifeline, and as well, if I get down there, I can essentially put, as the fallen firefighter, my foot on the pistol, grab onto the hose, and my other firefighters are going to pull me out of the hole. And lastly, we talked about moving hose. If you have a stairwell such as this, you could actually flip the hose into that stairwell and gain an excessive amount of hose immediately. So I could just pull it up through that stairwell. The key on this, though, is tying it off. If you have a hose becket, perfect. Use your hose becket. If you have webbing and you go to put a clove hitch on it, be aware, if you put that on zing and tight, you won't be able to move it. But prior to that, you would want to make sure, before you tie it, do I have enough hose for my fire room? Because if I don't tie this off and I go to open that nozzle, the back pressure alone is going to force this hose to go down your stairwell, and all the hose that you thought you gained is lost. So once the fire's been put out, really key, better and easier cleanup. Make sure the hose line stays charged because it's easier to move. And just the nozzle person leads to go out. So I would hold the nozzle, pivot, and make my movement out. As I'm moving forward and out, just as we came in, people will deal with those pinch points as I go. So always nozzle person back out first, keep your line charged. Then once you get it out, you break it down, and it's going to make your life a lot easier.